Hey, hello again, everybody. This is another episode of Tips and Tricks for Your Mix Mondays. I'm your host, Brother Rue from My Block Entertainment Home Recording Studios. Today's going to be part 2 in the series of creating space. If you remember last week, we were talking about how to create space within the drum tracks and the percussion area. Today, I kind of went ahead and pre-mixed everything, but I'm going to kind of go over and show you exactly how I did everything. With the drum section and how I created space. That way you guys kind of get an idea of how to create that space within your mix. Now, if you remember 2 tutorials back, I was talking about how to mix your kicks, and I've already mixed my kicks, and this is how they sound. Okay, sounds pretty good. They're cutting through the mix, and at my meter, you always want to check your master meter, because you don't excuse me, your goal is to hit 6 dB, but if you go up to 4 to 3, that's fine. So right now, just with the kicks, I'm sitting at a good 17.6 dB, and the kicks, especially in a hip-hop track, is the main thing that you want to stand out the most. Okay, so now we went to this to the snares of how to create the space. Last tutorial I was showing you how to do that, and the same principle applies, but I had 2 snares basically layering each other and following each other. So on this first snare, obviously I EQ'd it. I cut off the low frequency. I boosted the mid and the upper mid because there was too much of that upper mid that I didn't like. So I cut it out. I cut the frequency out of that one and boosted the mid up. So when we play just the kicks with this snare, you hear that nice space in there. And the space that I'm really going for is more or less in a bright kind of studio room effect. Okay, so right now I got the brightness of it, and I want this song to be really bright because as the instruments start to play, you'll see that the song kind of sounds like a very emotional song, but you want the brightness of it to stand out. Okay, so this would be the next snare, and I did the same thing. I cut out the low frequency, but this one didn't have too much upper mid to mid, so if I play it by itself, excuse me, this one, if I play it by itself, you know, it didn't really have that upper mid like this one did. Let me turn off the kicks, that way you can hear it. And see, I wanted that first snare to have more of a brightness to it, and then my second snare, I wanted it to kind of be a little bit bright, but a little bit darker than the first snare. And then when they layer together, they sound, you know, pretty nice. Okay, remember, everything was in mono, and you know, I just picked my points and I started slowly bringing everything up out of mono into the stereo image. Okay, so now with the kicks and the snares, I'm already starting to create this space. Have a listen. As opposed to if I took off these effects and the reverb of how we're creating the space, kind of just sounds flat. We put in the effects. Okay, now I'm using a reverb tool that I got from I think it's VST for free or VST Planet, one of the two, but it's called Old School Verb, and this reverb tool is awesome. I love it when I'm mixing because it really brings out a lot of space within the mix. I know in my last tutorial I just used the stock plug-in from FL Studio, but you know, I wanted to show you like what I mix with. You know, not saying that the stock plug-in won't work for you. It will work. You know, it just depends on how big you want your spacing to be. There's a lot of free plugins on the internet that you can get. You know, VST for free, VST Planet, go check them out. You know, you'll find the plugins that you need. Okay, so now I went to the hi-hats. Now the hi-hats, remember my last tutorial I said you don't have to put reverb on everything, and this is one of the instruments that I didn't put any reverb on. But what I did do is I panned. And this little section right here is where you can pan. Panning is very important too in the spacing process because you don't want frequencies mixing in with each other. And then plus with the reverb, if you look at this and how I EQ'd it, I cut out a lot of the low frequencies because you don't want a lot of muddiness in your mix. But right here, a lot of people say they would want to boost that because they would want to hear it more. Well, that's not always necessarily the case. You want to cut those frequencies. That way you can actually raise up the volume. Now I'll show you what I mean, because if I left it, let's say I did boost it up to here, right? And I mean, it sounds good, but if you look at your meter, you know, I'm already getting pretty close to where I don't want to be at, as far as, you know, my final mix down and my final mastering level, you know what I mean? So I cut this out so it still sounds good, and I can still boost this however I need to. Okay, and I also pan this to the right. Now the shaker, the same thing, I cut it out and I cut that frequency out because I don't want a lot of high frequencies in my mix. A lot of people think that, you know, just because you boost the high frequency that's going to sound brighter, and that's not necessarily the case. So if you take a listen to this, you can definitely get a sense of the space being created. Okay, so I'm not going to go through every plugin. I'm going to go ahead and turn on everything that I've already mixed, okay, and let you have a listen through the whole loop and let you know how it sounds now. Better yet, I'm going to go ahead and turn off everything that has the effects on it. Let you listen to it for a couple of bars. Okay, now just with the EQ it sounds good, but now we're going to add in all of our effects again, and I'm going to let you take a listen now. Okay, and all that creating space within the drum track is all due to EQ, reverb, and panning. That's how you're gonna start with this mix. And for me, I always do the drums and my percussion, and if I have vocals, I'll match the vocals to my kick drums, but that's in another tutorial. Okay, so now today is part 2. We done spent all that time on this and I'm gonna go real fast with this because it follows the same guidelines. Basically, we're gonna look for our plugins inside of our step sequencer, and right now, you know, I used a lot of things from Native Instruments Complete 10, and it's a new plugin that they, new software that they came out with, and I mean, it's amazing. I love this thing. And basically, what you're gonna want to do is kind of go through and find, and forgive me because I'm real kind of new to this, and kind of see what it is that, you know, like if they have reverb inside the plugins. That's basically what I'm telling you. This one doesn't, but it does have a surround sound, so you could play, you know, you could play around with that if you needed to. Okay, now I know for sure, I think this Reactor 5 has a reverb effect to it, which is, I believe, right here. And I remember this because when I was actually, oh, there it is, it's down here, sorry, it's right here. Okay, so if I take out this reverb and I turn on that Reactor 5, okay, obviously I'm gonna want to EQ it first. Does it need EQ? Kinda, sorta, because it's not really sitting in my mix the way that I need it to. So I'm gonna take out that low end because obviously we don't need nothing down there. Now I hear a lot of upper mid that's kind of interfering, so I'm gonna cut that. I'm gonna cut it down, and just like with the snare, I'm gonna kind of boost it up a little bit right here. Now I'm gonna add a little bit more low frequency to kind of give it more bassier kind of sound to it. Okay, so that sounds pretty good, and probably not too much right there. And I'm also gonna take out some of the mid right here as well. Okay, just kind of smoothing it out a little bit. Okay, now go back into here, into Reactor 5, and right here we took out that reverb. Okay, so Sounds good. Now let's put in the reverb effect. Okay, now we're starting to hear that reverb kind of match up with the reverb that we already have in the drums. Okay, but remember, everything's in mono, and you know, if it already sounds good in mono, I'm gonna tell you this right now from experience. If it already sounds good in mono, it's gonna sound amazing when you spread it out and put it in stereo. So here we go. Now level adjust it, you know, bring it all the way down. You could even do a little bit of panning if you want. Okay, so that sounds pretty good. Now me, I really would go ahead and the reason why I'm showing you this before I get into that is that you don't necessarily have to put reverb on your mixer right here if the plugin that you're using already has reverb. You don't want to have another reverb plugin on top of the reverb that's inside your plugin, if that makes sense. So I just want to point that out. That's part 2 of creating space, is look at your plugins, see if they have reverb. If they do have reverb, use the reverb inside the plugin to match up with the drums inside your mixer. Okay, now me, I use this plugin called Up Stereo, which again I got from the internet. It's amazing. I put it into mono first, okay, and then slowly start bringing it up into the wide area. And as you can see, the mix is already starting to sound wide, and it's really starting to sound full. Like I said, don't get into the concept of thinking that there's a plug-in out there that's just gonna fix your wideness in your track. You have to do it yourself. A really good producer is going to be able to go from scratch and build it up, and that's what I'm trying to show you today. Okay, now I'm going to add this bass in. Of course, when I get off this tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and finish mixing this, but just to give you all an idea, look inside your plugins for your reverb to match up with your drum section. Okay, so this is what the bass sounds like. And as you can see, everything's clear, everything's in their spots, and everything can be heard very well. So that's it for this episode of Tips and Tricks for Your Mix Monday. We'll get into part 3 of this series, and that's basically the final mix and how everything just comes together with panning the instruments and creating space that way as well. So until then, God bless you guys, and we'll see you again.